Hey everyone, it's Desiree, and I am back with the next installment to our junk journal. Now, I'll link the other ones down below, the one where I paged through this, and then I will also link to part one, where we just talked about papers, where you could find those vintage books, but it doesn't have to be a vintage book. Through the inks that we use and the blending, I mean, that can give you a vintage look. So I just happened to be fortunate to find those in my local Goodwills. I'm not really near a library because that's another resource that you can have as well. But it's not something that, when it comes to your papers, that you have to purchase a vintage book. You know, now you're coming up into an expense. The dollar store, if you have those near you, they are perfect. As I said, you can get copy paper from your dollar store that you can coffee or tea stain. I explained the process before in the papers. That took me forever to do that. One of the other things that I found, now remember, this one is geared with sketching material as well, but we're going to make just a general one. So I've pulled out some papers, and again, I will apologize. Now, this video will probably be long because we all know I get a little gabby. But I do have a thought process, so to speak, when I'm putting together a junk journal. So I actually have a list that I follow. You know, pull your papers first, put them in the order, make sure you have your cover, choose your inside lining on the cover. And it's something that I actually follow, which is kind of funny. I mean, let's think about it. But if that helps you, then I recommend it. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it. I'm stretching over here because, again, you know, we're live here somewhat, you know, filming. You know, I have a piece of paper here where I know the sizes that I'm doing, and I have it step by step on what I'm going to do. And because there's always a time where I'll forget to ink the edges before I put it on my piece, or if I do want to decide to sew in my junk journal, I forget to do the sewing first, and 9 out of 10 I'm always forgetting the sewing, so I'm taking this and I'm bending it throughout the sewing machine, which, you know, creates a weaker spot along your signature here because that is sewn through. So again, by writing it down, the steps for me, it helps, and I keep it as a reference point right near me. So if anyone's interested, you know, what I can do is I can, you know, type this out and we're going to go through it, because I'm actually, with the videos, it's going to kind of follow this a little bit. But these are the papers that I've pulled out, and I'm stretching over here. So I have this. This is my 12 by 12. This is going to be my inside lining. And what I'll do is I'll put this over here so that you can see it. So I always, you know, will add an inside lining now to it. So this is the one that I chose. I've got so many different colors here. I've got oranges and reds and some magentas and some teals. And of course the brown and the black. I do mix those too. I always use Craft Recollections. Even though it says 65, I think it's thicker than 65. I don't know. What are your thoughts? So I always have this as my cover. This is 8.5 by 11. I will be cutting this one down. And then here are the papers that I've chosen. Now, this pattern paper that I chose came from this paper pad, the I can't pronounce that, square. It's got 180 sheets, and they're just really, oh, I like that one. Really pretty papers. I mean, this would be beautiful on one side of your book as well. I mean, beautiful focal point right there. And there's 180 sheets in here, so this will last you a very, very long time. So when it comes to my papers, you know, I have my lined paper, and this is an old teacher's paper for assignments or our students' paper. And again, I will just take this and I will start folding my papers in half. My number seems to be 12, as strange as that is, but I forget where I found this. I believe I found this at the dollar store. I mean, that's where a lot of my papers come, but it's so old that it actually looks vintage. There, I'm sure you can't see it in the screen, but it's got a vintage look to it. This here is just drawing paper that I've pulled from the dollar store as well. It's my best resource. And again, I'm just folding my papers in half. I will be trimming them down, and when I trim them down, I trim them down as they are folded. I will pull out my paper creaser to go through that as well. These are just envelopes, so I'll always fold this down first, and then I'll fold this in half. It's just another texture. It creates an automatic pocket, or it can be a hinge, and you'll see that. So I've got one of those. This is my tracing paper. You can also use the dollar store wax paper. Now you can either make envelopes out of this. I like to add it to my pages. I think, again, it's that different texture. It's a different look. And you can see the different colors that I'm getting as I'm laying these on top of each other. And that's okay. That's the beauty of a junk journal. You know, you could have multiple colors. You don't have to stick with the vintage look. Use your cardstock if that's what you have in your stash. I know there's a lot of paper hoarders out there with those paper pads, and if you're a collector of those 12 by 12s, these are perfect. You can make it a bright junk journal. You don't have to have or use the inks, or you can use a different color ink for your edging. You know, again, there are no rules. It's what you want to create. So here's my music paper, and I'm just, again, going to fold this in half as well. I'll be trimming this down, so I've pulled a couple of those. As I said, 12 seems to be my number of sheets, and doesn't have to be 12 papers. It just has to be 12 items. So here's something that's different. So I have these two. So this is from a book, and then this is from a thesaurus or words and phrases. But you can see I can't fold them in half. Now you can take these and fold them this way, by all means, but I'm going to show you how I create that hinge. So these are two pages that are going to go together, and then I'm going to create another one with those. So I'll be trimming these. Again, I don't do well getting the papers out of the book. It's just something, but again, I'm just going to create my hinge. I think it adds a good texture. It adds a different look. It just adds a different level onto it. So these are just, you know, one side's going to have the words, the other side's going to have the words and phrases, and then I'll do the opposite for the other one. These are this is that paper that I just found. It's lined. I think it's like accounting paper. It's blank on one side, lined on the other. Now this is my coffee dyed. This was actually dipped into the pot where, or the pan that I have my coffee in. So this was actually dipped and then baked. And then the same thing with this one. Now this is just a regular piece of copy paper. And again, you can get copy paper from your local dollar store. You don't have to go to your office supply. With the number that I do make, I do get mine from the office supply, and I'll get a ream of 500 sheets for like $4, which in the long run is, you know, a little bit, it's more economical, but it all depends on how many of these you're going to make. You'll probably do just fine with just getting a pack of 50 or 100 out of your local thrift or dollar store. So those were dipped. This here is the one that I sprayed, so I have a variegated look going on. So, but I want to make sure that white is towards the top, but that's okay. I'm just going to fold that in half. So once I have all of my papers out, and you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, because they're going to count, 1 is with the hinge, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I don't count my cover, so I have 12, and then of course I do have that center to make a pocket. And what's really cool with these is these are coffee stained as well, but one side looks a little bit different than the other. So one side usually is darker than the other. So it all depends. Do I want the lighter side to show, or do I want the darker side? I think in this case, I would like the darker side to show. So I'm going to make sure that's folded. I'll go through each of these now and just go through and run with my paper creaser to make sure I have nice, good, sharp edges on this. Of course not those, because I got to create the hinge. So we'll put those like that. Gonna come through. Just give myself some good creases. I do like to crease my papers first. Some do take their papers and stack them all up and then fold them over all at once. I think when it comes to this, I have a better shot of getting them all nestled into each other. And that's why I'll take my paper creaser individually, or bone folder, whichever. I just use the term paper creaser just to go through, because then it's a sharp point that it's going through. And they'll be opened back up again. So now what I'm going to do, I'm going to set these two aside, because I'll show you that hinge in a moment, but I'm going to get my other papers pretty much set up and trimmed down. So let me clear these out real quick and we'll show you. So when it comes to the inside papers that are inside the book, I like to make sure that they are set, and yes, it's written down on my piece of paper. I like them to be cut, if I have it open, 8 1/4 top to bottom by 10. So if I'm folding it, what I'm going to do, and for these I can use my smaller paper trimmer. So for this, since this is my top to my bottom, I'm going, you know what? I'm going to use my bigger trimmer. Yes. So this one's kind of tough to make sure that I have it in screen, but I will try to make sure that you can see the bulk of it. So that's this here. So what I want to do is I want to cut 1/4 inch off, because again, for the majority, some of my papers could be 8 1/2 by 11, some of them could be 9 by 12, depending upon what I'm using. So for this, I know that it is 9 inches, because this is actually like a drawing paper, so they're usually 9 by 12. So I need to make sure that I take off 3/4 inch. So I'm going to make sure I'm at 8 1/4 here, because my inside papers are always 8 1/4 for height, and then if you keep them flat, they're 10 inches if you do your cutting first. Again, I like to fold, so I know my fold is going to be at 5. So then I'm going to come down and cut that. So now this is 5 inches by 8 1/4. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go through my papers. Some of them could already be that way. Some of them could be smaller. That's fine. I don't have to trim them. So I'm just going to set that there. I'm going to look at this. I always know that this is a 8 1/2 by 11. So I already know that I'm going to cut that at 5 going across. And then I'm just going to measure this so that I can bring it down. And here I can choose, okay, do I want to cut into this to give it a little bit of dimension or texture, or do I want to cut on the straight side? So I'm actually going to cut along or near those holes. You could even choose to cut the holes off, period. So I could actually come in, just line this up, and just cut those off directly. And then I don't have that or those images, and that's okay. That just means they're going to be a different size and they'll sit differently in the book, and that's okay. This we don't need to cut because it's already within the 5 inches and we know it's already the height. So for my tracing paper, I'm going to do the same thing. I always make sure that my crease, my fold, is to my left, and I'm going to cut that down. And again, these are the inside pages. Sorry for the slamming there. So I always make sure that when it comes to my sheet music, I tend to tear. So I'm just going to tear this edge right off. And I'm going to do that to the other side as well, because I just like the music portion, not so much that wide band. And then I'm going to do the same thing on this edge. And I'm going to check. I already know I'm at the right height, but now I'm going to check, am I within the 5 inch, making sure that this is flat against that line. And I'm a little bit over, but that's okay, because we always like to have things sticking out just a little bit. So that's all I'm going to do with my sheet music. Now this one comes down a little bit more. I'm still going to look at that and still say, you know what? I'm going to tear. So I am a creature of habit. I tend to do the same things. Like my papers could be different, but when it comes to that paper, I'll kind of do the same thing. So here's my coffee dyed, and I'm going to trim that down. And I'm going to trim that down. So some may say, okay, well, why are you worrying about, trimming your papers down, especially to the 8 1/4, because, you could just make it 8 1/2. And that's a very good question. What I do is my cover, I keep that at 8 1/2 on the height. So I like these to be set in just a little bit, so that I can get the different layers so that they can show, because again, they're all trimmed to 5 inches wide, which is 10 if we unfold it. But when you put them all together, they'll fan out, because even though you've creased them and all of that, you've got the ones in the center that'll stick out a little bit. So you do get these different textures and different lengths that come out. So I think the 5 inches is a good measurement, and the number of pages that I choose, they won't go past my cover. So these are all set. I am going to cut down my cover as well. So that's this. Again, I don't cut along here. I'm going to cut this way. So if these are at 10, I'm going to cut this at 10 1/2. And I don't fold this yet. I keep this flat. So I'm going to cut this at 10 1/2. So I'm taking a 1/2 inch off. And I keep that. I'm just saying, I keep that. I keep a lot of the scraps. I keep these scraps as well. I keep these scraps as well as when I'm working on the journal. I keep all of the scrap pieces that I think that are useful. My tracing papers, because they're nice sizes, so I will keep those and set those aside because they can be part of my embellishments. This can be part of my embellishment in some way, or any accents that I add. Now these fine strips, you could keep these as well too. That's your choice. These are fiddly for me. I'll keep that. And then again, I will keep this as well. These are good for backings and stuff like that. So I have a pile that I'll keep that there just in case I use it. But I also take them and put them up there to know that I will. So this piece is already cut. This is my outside cover. And now for my inside cover, I always want to make sure, and I always forget, to make sure that I have this sitting the right way. So this is how I want it to sit on the inside of my cover. So this, my inside cover, will be cut, and I call this my lining. This will be cut to 10 3/8. So we'll make that cut. And I keep this as well. And now I'm going to decide, okay, do I like this part here or do I like this part? So I do like this part down here. So I'm going to turn it because this is the part that I'm going to cut off. And then this is cut 8 3/8. And of course, I keep that as well. So now all of our pieces are cut. And what I'm going to do, and again, apologizing, this is going to be a long video. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab, these are just lunch bags. You know, again, you can use any paper that you want. And what I'm going to do, I usually grab a pair of scissors for these. And what I'll do is I will come into the middle, right down onto one of the folds, and I will just cut. I'm not worried about it being straight, but I just want to cut because then I'm starting to open this. What I will also do is just cut off the end here to make it easier so that it starts to open. You can see now it's starting to fan for me. So you can see that it's just starting to unravel. So now what I can do is once I open this, I can go along this edge. So this is the base. I'm now cutting the base out. And yes, I say that. So now when I open this, she's flat. All right. So then what I do is I just fold it on one of the sides. And I use 2 of these per section that I'm going to layer together. Okay. I use 2 of these. Or 2 of these. So, and I cut these 2 inches. So what I'm going to do is I can go this way. I like to have that up because I'm going to cut that off. And now I'm going to go 2 inches. I'm going to put that on my mark. I'm going to cut 1. I'm going to set that aside. And now I'm going to cut 2. And then at this point, that would be my cat playing with a bag. Sorry. And then what I'll do is, since these are folded over, I'm going to see if these are the correct height. And you know what? They are. So I just happened to realize that when I fold it that way, these are absolutely perfect. So all I have to do is take my scissors, slit right onto the top, and I'm going to check these just to make sure. And again, click that right up onto the top. So now I have the pieces that I need to create my hinge. I will save that. So let me get this out of my way, and then we can open up our space a little bit. Okay, so when it comes to these, I fold them in half. And I just use my fingers for this. Again, you can use, once they are on my piece or they've created my hinge, that's when I'll come in with my paper creaser. So now I have these set. I'm going to open them back up. And now it's time to glue. So the glue that I do like to use throughout this process or any of the processes, there's two. I do enjoy either the Binkin 3-in-1 or the Fabri-Tac. I just opened this one up first. These, to me, they're the same, the Fabri-Tac to the 3-in-1. I haven't seen any differences. Either this, or I do like to use also my art glitter glue when I'm adding smaller details and so forth. So they're usually the two glues that I will utilize. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my beacon and I'm going to add glue to one side. I work on one side at a time. And I'm first going to go around the edge. And I'm going to go just close up to that fold. And then I'm going to fill in. And then I'm going to take my sheet. Now this is nice and trimmed already, so I don't have to worry about that. I'm going to line it up at the bottom and I'm going to slide up. It does give you some wiggle room for a little bit. And it's okay that my hinge, because when I put my other one on, sometimes I do like to let the edge hang off because then I can match this up, but that's okay. Again, it's a junk journal. I'm okay that some of this will be covered. That's fine. You can make that your choice. You'll see in the second one that I may do that a little bit differently. I'm going to do the same thing to the other side. I'm going to put my bead of glue down. And then I'm going to fill in. And now I'm going to grab my second page. Now I'm going to make sure that my writings are the same. Go ahead, ask me how I know. Yes, been there, done that. Again, it's what makes a junk journal fun. Now the other tool that I love to use is, I love to use my tool-in-one from Spellbinders. Now it has a mini brayer on it, but if you already have a brayer, please use that one. I just like to roll over, it flattens out the glue. And it just helps to give me a nice, strong bond. So now I have this. Now, since I can't see my edges because these were perfect, I'm just going to grab a pencil. A pencil is your friend as well. I'm just going to flip this up, and I'm going to put a mark there. And I'm going to put a mark there. And then I'm going to do the same thing over here. So I'm going to put a mark here. And I'll put a mark here. And then that'll just help me to guide to keep them straight because, you know, things have to be straight for me. And now I'm going to do the same thing with this one. Except this one, I'm just going to go straight down onto it. So I'm going to put my bead of glue. And you don't have to, when you put your glue down, you don't have to go right up to the edge because since you are using a liquid glue, it will travel. So it'll fill in those gaps. And if you if you go close to the edge, but not too close to it, you won't have any glue oozing out, if that makes sense. So I'm going to use my finger and place that down, and I'm going to slide this up. And just make sure. Now, it's okay that I'm not covered on the top and the bottom. Again, it adds interest into your journal. And I just use my brayer to flatten that out. It's a nice quick drying glue. And now what I'll do is I will come in, I will fold this over, and now I'll come in with my paper creaser and fold that down. I'm going to check. Now this is a little bit over 5. So I want to make sure, and I'm just going to pull in this trimmer here because my other one is fast away. I'm going to match it up to my 5. I'm going to hold it down and just trim right down. And now that page is ready. So let's do the next one. Now this one, it's going to be different because the pages, I've straddled them. All right. So same thing, and I will speed up. Now I'm not going to worry about this because it's going to be hidden within my hinge. Always, what I do find with these glue bottles is you've got to clean them often. So you get glue everywhere. I'm just saying. So I always, with the scrap papers, I'll pick that up with that. And then we'll trim this one down. Okay, so now we have our papers together. So now what I like to do, I already know that here's my cover, and I'm going to place this in here. Matter of fact, I will set that now. I promise all the other videos will not be as long. I'm just saying. So I'm going to come in. I'm sure it's thrilling to watch me glue papers together. That would be my Max saying hello. If you hear him, I think he's hungry. So you can see, and I'm not putting a lot of glue. It's actually, it looks like I'm putting a lot, but it's a thin line. Now, since we cut this a little smaller, it's going to give me about 1/8 of a border around this. And again, I just let her fall where she is, and then I just come in with my brayer and I go from the top to the bottom, and this helps to get that bond going, at least for me. You don't need this. I just think it smooths it out and gets that bond going, and I don't have bubbles and creases. And that is what's nice with this glue, because if I'm not mistaken, this is alcohol based. It's not water based, which is really nice. If I would use a regular, like a tacky glue or even the art glitter glue, you would actually see those glue swirls that I make. So this is ready. I just make sure that this is set. So that I can decide what I'm going to do with that. And again, I'm not folding this page yet. So I'm going to set that aside, and here are our papers. Here's what we have. So we have, let me clean off my glue again. I'm here. Okay. This is my little trash bin that stays by my desk there. So now we have our 2 sheets here. These are my coffee dyed. Here are my music, my tracing, the envelope, and then just 2 miscellaneous. So I'm going to start out with this one. Now here's where I start opening them. So I'm going to come in with this one first. And you can tell I'm just looking at my papers. I'm going to come in with one of these next. And you can see they're the perfect height. So I'm going to open that. And I'm going to set that down. I think I'm going to come in with this one. And I'm going to open this one. So that's what I'm doing. I'm now just fanning these all together. I'm going to put one of these in next. I'm going to put my envelope in next. And I think I'm going to grab this. No, I think I'll grab this next. No, I think I'll grab this next. I'm going to grab one of my papers. You can see how they're going to overhang, and that's okay. Here's my next coffee dyed. I'm going to come in with another one of these. And I think this will be pretty, being shining through the tracing paper. So I've got my next paper here. This one's going to come in, and then this one's going to be my center. Now what's great with this, since it's so thick, I can just set that right in there and then just pull my papers up and just nestle that right in there. So that is what the start of our junk journal is going to look like. Now again, it can be regular paper, whatever you want to use is just fine. But that's usually, because that's going to hide my signature once we sew this together, which will be in the next little bit down first. Because before you do your signature and you sew it together, if you're going to do any sewing, if you do sewing, you want to make sure you do that now. If you're going to add any embellishments on the side, and that'll be our next video where I show, you know, you can put lace, you can stencil, you can ink, you can put those types of designs when it comes into your junk journal. Some of you may be asking, okay, why aren't you folding the cover? The reason why is because I do sew around the outside of all of this all at once. So I like to keep that flat, and then once I'm done that, I will fold that. So give me 1 second. I will sew around that so that you can see what this will look like. Okay, so now I have sewn around it, and you can see it better on this side. So I usually just go around twice. I make sure I actually am intentional in making it crooked. I add some zigzags every so often into some places, just to give it that difference. Now, you know that if you do so, you know, this side looks really, really nice, where this side, you know, you're puncturing through. So I always just take my paper creaser and I just run along those sew lines, those sew marks, just to, I guess in a way, flatten them out. It's just something that I started and it made it look nicer. I leave the tassels. I don't cut those. And now what I will do with this is I will put it into a scoreboard. Because you've got 2 layers here and sometimes the glue kind of goes all over the place. Remember, you want to make sure that you are covering both areas when you're sewing. I'm just going to confirm my size is 10.5. So it's going to be at 5.25. I'm going to score. And I do like to score on my craft size. So I'm just going to come down and score. And then I'm going to turn it. And I'm going to do the other side. So at least I have a start on that fold. And now I will come in and bend it. I do like to bend it slowly because, again, you do have 2 pieces of paper. And I just bend it slowly. I let the paper break their fibers or whatever they're doing, and then I'll come in with my fingers and I will lightly just go over. I don't need it to be as sharp as what these are, but I just lightly go over that. So it's not a firm fold because, again, we're now going to take these, and you can see they don't go to the top and the bottom, and we're going to set that in. And now that is what the start of our journal is. So we've chosen our papers, we've made our paper hinge, we've layered them the way that we want them. At this point, I'll usually take a clip and then say, okay, now I'll start designing. And that will be the next video because I don't think I could keep you around any much longer to watch any other videos. So again, I will link the other videos down below. I hope you found this helpful, especially I showed you maybe something a little different, I'm hoping. When it comes to the hinge, if you have papers that you want to use and you just need them to sit this way, you can fold them to have them go this way. Maybe that's just not working for you. Same thing when it comes to the composition books. Again, you can get these from the dollar store. Open it up to the center, snip these strings. You now have solid papers with a fold already, and you can trim it and you can have your lines going the right way. Sometimes, you know, when we put them this way, it kind of throws us off a little bit. It took me a while for that. And that's okay. Again, these are anything that you want them to be. So I do hope you enjoyed it. The products or the videos that I've done already, will be linked down below. If there are any products like the paper pad that I use, I will try to find that and link that down below to where I find it, along with the glues and the tools that I'm using here as we go. Again, just remember, you don't have to sew, and I'll show you alternatives to that. If you have any questions or comments, please leave those down below. And I will get back to you as soon as I can. I want to thank you so much for sticking around for this series. I do hope you're finding it somewhat informative, and maybe I'm showing you something just a little bit different that you haven't tried. I'd love for you to subscribe, so make sure you hit that bell to know the next video. Hit that subscribe button so that you're part of my community here. But by all means, remember what's most important, always. You gotta be creative. Till next time, bye.